ready to dive into something a little different today. We're going to be talking social selling for podcasters. And before you switch off thinking this isn't for you, it's not about becoming a pushy salesperson or anything.
Not at all. Think of it more like turning your podcast into a magnet,
Yeah.
Drawing in those listeners who are really going to resonate with what you do.
Okay, I like where this is going. So a listener actually sent us this article from Podcasting Secrets, wanted us to really deep dive into it. And it's an interview with this guy, Timothy Hughes, who's, get this, a self-proclaimed social selling guru.
Oh.
And he runs 5 podcasts himself.
Talk about walking the talk, right?
Right. So he knows what he's talking about. And the big takeaway from everything he says is that it's not about being salesy at all. It's about it's about building those genuine connections.
Exactly. That's what it's all about.
Okay, so that all sounds good in theory, but how do we actually make that happen? Where do we even start?
Well, he talks about a bunch of different strategies, but I think a good place to start is your social media profile. He's really big on something called making your profile buyer-centric.
Buyer-centric. Okay, what does that even mean? That sounds a bit like, marketing jargon to me.
It kind of is, yeah. But it's really about shifting your mindset,
Yeah.
Instead of your profile being like a list of accomplishments, like think resume. It needs to scream, I understand your problems, listener, and I'm here to help.
Okay. So less me, myself, and I, and more like how you can actually provide value to your ideal listener.
You got it. Think about it. When you land on someone's profile and they're talking about the problems you're facing and how they can help solve them, don't you immediately want to learn more?
Oh, absolutely. It's like they're reading your mind and offering a solution before you even have to ask the question.
Exactly. And one way to do that is by, directing them to your podcast.
Yeah, that makes sense. But just having a link in your bio, that doesn't quite cut it, does it?
No, definitely not. Hughes really emphasizes using language that's going to resonate with your ideal listener. Like the kind of language that makes them think, these are my people.
So they feel like they found their tribe. I like that.
Exactly. It's about creating that sense of community, belonging even, before they even hit the play button for the first time.
Okay, so we've got our social media profile speaking directly to our dream listener. What's next?
Well, Hughes says your podcast itself can actually be a really powerful relationship-building tool. He's really big on inviting potential clients or even industry leaders on as guests.
Oh, that's smart. Instead of a formal sales pitch, you're just having a conversation.
Exactly. You're showcasing your expertise, but in a way that's natural and engaging. Imagine listening to your favorite podcast, right? And they bring on this guest and they just totally align with your interests and your needs.
I'd be hooked.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're building that and trust factor without even trying.
And it takes the pressure off, too, because it's not a sales call. It's a conversation between passionate people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you never know where those conversations might lead.
Yeah, it's like you're building a bridge, right, between you and your listener.
I love that.
And that bridge is built on shared interests and that genuine connection.
Absolutely. And speaking of building bridges, Hughes also talks about focusing on value. Instead of constantly plugging your podcast,
Right. So less listen to my show and more, hey, here's something you might find valuable. And by the way, I happen to talk about this in more detail on my podcast.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's about becoming that go-to resource for your listeners, someone they actually want to hear from.
Yeah, someone they trust because they know you're not just trying to sell them something every 5 seconds.
Exactly. And one way to really solidify that trust is by diversifying your content.
Oh, okay.
Thinking beyond just the podcast itself.
Okay, so what? Taking those golden nuggets of wisdom from our episodes and spreading them across different platforms.
Exactly. Think bite-sized videos for social media, quick tips, or behind the scenes snippets. Even just you sharing your thoughts on some industry news.
Yeah, meeting your audience where they are.
Exactly. You're taking your podcast's brilliance and, repackaging it in a way that's going to reach a wider audience.
It's like you're creating this whole ecosystem of content stemming from your podcast.
Now you're getting it. And remember, this isn't about, creating a whole new set of content from scratch. You're repurposing what you already have. Think about those key takeaways from your episodes. Those could easily be turned into an engaging Instagram carousel or a thought-provoking Twitter thread.
Right, yeah. And it makes your content more accessible, too, for different types of learners.
Absolutely. Some people are visual learners. Some people prefer audio. Some people, they like to read. So by Like diversifying your content, you're catering to everybody.
So we've covered our social media profiles. We've talked about like leveraging our podcast for collaborations and diversifying our content. Anything else we need to know about, or are we ready to hang up our social selling hats for the day?
Not so fast. Hughes has one more ace up his sleeve, and it's a big one, networking.
Networking, the word that strikes fear into the hearts of even the most seasoned professionals. Does this mean I need to start attending every industry event, handing out business cards like candy?
No, not at all. In fact, Hughes specifically says it's not about quantity, it's about quality. It's about engaging genuinely with people in your industry.
Okay, so ditch the elevator pitch and just like focus on building those real connections.
Yeah. Exactly. Join online communities. Participate in Twitter chats. Leave thoughtful comments on blog posts. Be present. And engage in a way that feels natural to you.
So it's more about being a good conversationalist than like a master networker.
I like that. Be interested, be helpful.
Yeah.
And the connections will follow.
Yeah. And who knows, those connections could lead to like amazing opportunities down the line, guest appearances on other podcasts, collaborations, even just, new friends who share your passion.
Exactly. It's all about building relationships and adding value.
Okay. I have to admit, this is all starting to sound a lot less intimidating and a lot more doable than I initially thought.
That's the beauty of it. It's not about like some complicated formula or a secret handshake. It's about showing up authentically and building genuine connections.
Right. It's about shifting your mindset from how can I get people to listen to my podcast to how can I provide value to my listeners and build a community around my podcast.
You've hit the nail on the head. And the best part is, when you approach social selling with that mindset, the selling part happens much more organically.
It's like they say, people buy from people they know, like, and trust. And what better way to build that than by offering valuable content, engaging in authentic conversations, and showing up consistently?
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
But before we get too carried away with all these strategies, it's important to remember that this is a marathon, not a sprint.
Right. We don't need to implement everything at once.
Definitely not. Start with one or two strategies that resonate with you and see how they work.
Test the waters. Yeah, exactly. Find your footing, get comfortable. And then start adding more and more, as you go.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to experiment. What works for one podcaster might totally not work for another. So it's about finding what feels authentic to you and your brand.
Totally. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one big takeaway we want our listeners to walk away with today?
It's really pretty simple. Social selling, at its core, is about building those relationships, providing value, and positioning yourself as that trusted voice in your space.
Yeah.
It's not about being salesy or pushy,
Right. It's about connection.
Exactly. It's about turning your podcast from a megaphone into a magnet, drawing people in with your expertise, authenticity, that genuine desire to help.
And who knows, you might just land your dream client or collaborator along the way. It's amazing what can happen when you shift your focus from broadcasting to building relationships.
Absolutely. It's about playing the long game, nurturing those connections, and just watching your podcast community blossom.
It really is. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. But for all you listeners out there, the learning doesn't stop here. What resonated with you most today? What strategies are you excited to try? Let us know on social media. We want to keep this conversation going.
We're eager to hear your thoughts. Until next time, happy podcasting.